So in this video, we are going to cover all the login related APIs, as we have already created some basic CRUD operations on an entity like category, product and subcategory. And I have also added the CRUD operation on the users. The user details are used for logging into the applications. So in this video, we are going to talk about what are the additional features you have to add in the CRUD operations of the user. So we are going to add authentication and authorization mechanism in the user module. Hey everyone, this is Kamran and I'm a full stack web developer and I'm building e-commerce application in this video series. And in this Express.js video, I'm gonna add authorization and authentication in the user module. So what exactly I'm going to do? I'm going to add some security features in our e-commerce application. So this is the backend video. I'm going to create same for the front end as well. But in this video, I'm going to talk about and create everything in the backend itself. So if you are new here, I would suggest you to follow the whole series so you can understand what is going in this video. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would suggest you to hit the subscribe button down there. Now let's talk about how we are going to add some authorization and authentication. So we have added this API where we are adding a user in the database. So currently I'm using our normal text file as a database. So we are going to add user in this file itself. But the thing is, for the user, we have this very sensitive data which we have to store in the database, which we cannot store in the plain text. For example, we have this password of a user in this data. So let's say tomorrow, if by any chance, if due to some lack of security, your database is hacked by some hacker, then they will get all the password of the user and they can log into your application using this password, right? So to avoid that, we are not going to store the passwords in the plain text in this database. Instead of that, what we are going to do, we are going to encrypt the password and then store in the database. And this encryption and decryption will take place when we are going to add the user and when we are going to authenticate the user. So first let's add the user with encrypted password and then we will talk about how we authenticate user. So to make this simple, I would explain in this way that if let's say if you are a user and your username is your email address and you have put some password, let's say ABCD, and I would suggest you don't put this simple password or I myself will hack into your application. So let's say if you put this ABCDE, right? What I'm going to do, I'm not going to store this ABCDE. Instead of that, I'm going to encrypt and then I'm going to store this data. And then whenever user is going to put a password in the login page, then we are going to convert that password again into a random string using the same mechanism, and we will compare that encrypted data and then only allow the users to use the application. So now let's try to add some code to encrypt our password. And in order to encrypt, we are going to use a Node.js package named as Bcrypt. For that, first let's install that in our Node.js application. So for that, I'm going to just use npm install bcrypt-save. This will install the Bcrypt in our application. So once Bcrypt is installed, let's import that in our application. So let's Bcrypt is equals to require Bcrypt. So the flow in which we are going to add a user is that we have to keep in mind that every time whenever you are going to add any user, you have to check that, whether this user already exists in our database or not. And to do that, we have to compare the email of the upcoming user with the database. So let's do that. So we have this new user and I'm going to take the email of this user into a variable. So that will be email is equals to new user dot email. And now I have to check this email present in our database or not, right? So let's do that. So for that, I'm going to create a new method. So that will be const if user already exist is equals to check if user already exists. And in this we have to pass the email, right? And let's define this function first. So I'm going to say const this is equals to this, and here we are passing the email. So now I have to check the database, right? So here your database is this file, right? So I'm just gonna copy paste this one. Whatever data we have, we are going to loop over that and check for this one, right? So data on this, so this will be each user and each user. So I will check if user dot email is equals to email, right? So if this is true, then we have to say, so first let me create a variable name as user exist, and it will be false by default. So if I find a user whose email is the same email, then the user exist will become true. And when the loop is finished, all we have to do is to return this user exist. So now once I get this variable true and false, and according to that only we are going to move forward. So if user exists, then only we have to proceed further, else we can just simply return a false error, right? So let's return something here. So you return res dot, and this status should be 500. And this will we can also append a JSON with this data that will be success false. This will be a flag for success of the API, and we can also add a message in this. So we can send a message back to user that you are already a user. So this is for if user is already present in our database. Now once we are sure that user is not present in our database, then we are going to encrypt the data, right? So Bcrypt generate the hash out of a plain string. So the plain string here will be the password. So we are going to generate a hash. The hash is a fixed digit encrypted data out of a plain data. And to create a better hash out of this Bcrypt, we are going to use salt as well. Salt is nothing, just an additional string which is added to the hash to make it more secured. So let's do that. So first we have to create a salt. We can create using Bcrypt. Bcrypt dot generate salt, and this will, and in this first you have to pass the strength of the salt, which we will keep as 10. And after this we are going to pass the callback, right? First parameter will be error, and the second one will be the data will be the actual salt which will be generated out of this. So if we get error, we just simply gonna throw an error here, or we can throw an error, or we can just return an error from here as well. So return res dot status 500 again, and here we can keep the JSON, and here also we have to say success is false and message will be, and here we can simply pass that it's an encryption error. The user or the developer will know that this is an encryption error. Okay, and if we are getting data, then we are going to just update the new user dot salt is equal to data. So data will be the salt, and now once we have this salt, we are going to generate the hash using this Bcrypt. Let's do that. So for that we will be using Bcrypt dot hash method, and in hash we have to pass two things. The first will be the plain password. So let's say user dot password will be our password, and then we have to pass the salt, right? So let's pass the salt, which is the new user dot salt, as we have assigned the data in this salt. And then we have to pass a callback. So in this also, like, the first will be the error, and then we are going to get the data, and the data will be the encrypted hash, right? That will be our password. So if we get error again, we can just simply copy paste this one over here, and then if we get the password, what we can do, we will just update the password, right? So that will be new user dot password is equals to data, right? So this is our hashed data, so I'm just going to date that. And now I'm going to add this new user to our database. So for that, I'm going to update this inside our application. So here I'm going to push this here over here, and then I have to write this as well. So here let's return a positive response. So that will be status 200. In JSON we can returns success as true. So, and message can be user is registered successfully. And this is how we are going to add the user in our database. So now using Postman, let's try to hit this API. So here in the Postman, what we are going to do, we are just going to enter our user API and we're going to test this out. So, and in order to do this, we have to pass the post API. We have to make the post API to add the user, right? So let's do that. Just remember from the last video, we have to use the JSON, right? And in this, I'm going to pass the JSON, and here I can simply pass email, which will be my email, Sheikh Kamran @kwk.com, and we have this password, right? So password that will be code with Kamran, and here I'm going to add few more details such as name, so that will add something in the user, and of course we have to pass the is delete key as well. So this is our JSON, and we are going to hit this and try. So here we are getting that you are already a user. That means that we have done small mistake in our application. Let's see that. So here if user is already exists, we don't have to run this. Instead of that, we have to check the false of this, and then only we do the rest of the things if we get false over here. So now when I hit this, we can see that we got the message of user is registered successfully. That means that the user has been added. Now you can check this in two ways. The first way is to directly check the text file which we are created. And the other way is to make a login API and use that to verify this, right? So let's do the first thing first. So now in this users.txt, you can see that a new entry has been added, that is name is deleted, email, and password is something encrypted, right? So this is what we wanted to do. And we also have this salt. Now let's try to hit the API again. Yeah, so if I hit this again, I'm getting this, you already as well. So this API is working perfectly. So now let's try to add a login API for this user. And for that, I'm going to create a new API over here, and that will be a post API. So login should be always a post API, and this will be login, right? So let's use this login, and I can add this login file as well. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to save this as login.js, and inside this, I'm going to add the login logic. So for this login API, we are going to get two elements, right? Email and password. So let's create two variables for each of them. So it will be request.body.email, and same for the password. So first thing first is to check whether this email is present in our application or not. And we can simply just copy the add user logic inside this. So here I'm going to copy this whole logic. So when I check if the user present or not, and if it is present, then we have to do all the logic, and if it isn't present, you have to just say that you are not registered with us. You are not registered with us, right? So this you have to return in case if that email address does not exist in your database. And if it is existing, then we have to use the Bcrypt to validate the user, right? Let's do that. So first time to require the Bcrypt, and now we have to make a small change that we have, instead of returning this false, we are going to return the user data itself. Then this will become our user data, right? So let's say this as user data, and this is our user data. And now we have to get the encrypted password, right? So that will be encrypted password is equals to user data dot password, right? So the password which is stored in our data is the encrypted one. So now we have to compare this password with the password which we got in the API request body. And to do that, we are going to use Bcrypt method name as compare. So Bcrypt dot compare. In this, we have to pass both the passwords. The first will be the plain text password, which will be password over here, and then we have to pass the encrypted password, and then we have to pass the callback. So the callback will have error and data, and on error, we have to simply pass the error which we are returning in this one. So we can just simply copy paste this one over here. And if we get the data, so that means that this is working. So you just have to return a positive response. So for that, we are going to return the positive JSON, that is will be success is true, and the message will be successfully logged in, right? So user is successfully logged in. So here the Bcrypt compare will return true or false according to whether the password entered is correct or not. So if it is true, then we have to return this user is logged in successfully, right? So we can do simply if data, and can return a negative response if it is the correct one, right? So we can do that. So here I will add a status of 500 in the else, right? And we can do the same with 200 in this positive one. And in this message you can say the password is wrong. To reiterate, what we have done here is that we are using this compare method. In the response of this, we will get the data, and data is positive, then that means the user is logged in, and if it is false, we know that the password entered is wrong. Now let's test this out. So in this API, if I have to add login to use that login API, so we have to make the change in the body as well. So we have to just send email and password, right? So we'll remove everything else, and we will just send this email and password. So here, when I hit this, you can see over here that I'm getting user is logged in successfully, right? Because we are entering a correct password over here. So let's make the change in this password, and you can see here the password is entered wrong is been returned in this API. So again, I can correct the password and hit enter, and this will return the successful login again. And so this means that the login API is running successfully. Now this hashing of password will ensure that the proper user or a true user is only logging into your application. But we have to verify the user on each and every API call. And how to do that? We are going to use JWT, that is JSON Web Tokens. And what is that? So JSON Web Tokens are the basically encrypted tokens which is used for encryption and authentication in the web applications. This JWT is basically a string which we will be giving to a user when user is going to log into our application, and user will use this token or in each and every API call that he will make. So in order to use the JWT, we have to install a JWT package of Node.js. Then we have to generate a token and return that token in this login API itself. Let's first install that JWT in our application. And the package which provide JWT is known as JSON Web Tokens. So we are going to install that. And once this is installed, we are going to import this in our application and use this. This is now installed. So let's run our application. So in our login API, let's import this JWT first. So I'm going to import this JWT as JWT and require the JSON Web Tokens over here. This token we have to generate once the user is been authenticated by the password, right? So we can do this inside this data. If it is true, then we have to generate the token. So I'm going to generate a token over it. Say token is equals to JWT dot sign a token, right? Sign a token. So this JWT token and also contains some data or payload, and that payload we can use to authorize the user in the applications. So we have to pass the data of the user inside this, and instead of passing the whole user data, you have to prepare a data for this. So you don't have to pass the password inside this. Instead of that, you can use create a new variable name as person. So this person will contain the email of the for now. And later on, when we are going to add the user roles, then we have to pass this user role inside this for the user authorization. And here we have to pass a secret also, and this secret is a secret key which you have to generate. So let's generate this. So here I'm going to say const secret is equals to, so this you can keep any string. So here I will be saying code with Kamran, and we have to pass the secret over here. And after this, you have to pass some configurations, right? So you have to say what time this particular token will expire. So let's add that. So expire in, and here you have to pass the number of seconds in which this token will be expire and your user will be logged out of the application. And this is done in order to keep your application safe. I will pass here that this token should expire in every hour. 60 seconds and 60 minutes. That's it. So this will expire in 60 minutes. That is 1 hour. And this token I'm going to return in this API. So in this API, we are going to get this token. And after this, calling any of the API, we are going to use this token. So first, let's check that we are getting this token in our API or not. So here, when I hit this login API, I'm getting this token, right? And this token consists of payload and some random generated hash key. And now what we have to do, we have to make sure then when we are making any other API call, we are sending this token. And in our application, we have to make sure whenever there is an API call, we have to check for this token, and this token will be added in the header of an API. So first, let's add a mechanism to check that header in the APIs. And for this, we are going to add a middleware for checking the token in the header. So for that, first I have to create a new folder over here, which will say middleware. So let's create that. And inside that, I'm going to create a file index.js, and this middleware makes sure all the APIs contain that token. So here let's create a module which will check that. So here first I have to import JWT in order to verify that token, and let's require our JSON web token over here. And then we have to keep that secret over here. So let's copy paste that secret over here and the secret should be same to generate and to verify the token. Let's create a module function over here. Inside this function, we have to check for the token, and that token we will be adding into the header of the request, right? So let's check the header of the request here. So that will be our auth header, and in this we are going to check for request.headers, and in this we are going to add a authorization token, right? So I'm just going to check for a key as authorization. We are going to add this key in the header from the client. So first I will check if I have this token, or if I don't have this token, I'm going to simply return a response with the status code as 401. 401 stands for unauthorization. So this we have to use. So let's response with 401 over here. And so on the client side, you have to check if you are getting 401, then you have to simply log out the user out of the session and move them to the login page. If we have this token, better to rename this to token. And if we have this token, then we have to just verify it. So JWT dot verify is a method in which we have to pass this token, and then we have to pass this secret, and then we will pass a callback. So in callback here also we will get error and data, and the data we will get if the token is valid or not. So if we are getting error over here, then it means that the token is not valid, right? So here also we have to respond with 401. So let's do that, send. Else if you get the data, then what you have to do, you have to update the user in the request itself, and this will be data. And later on, this request.user you can use to validate the user inside the API. And then once it is validated, then you just simply call the next. Now here we have to keep in mind one thing, the few of the APIs you have to ignore, and you don't have to look for the authorization in that is login, right? Login is the process in which we are appending the token. So we are not going to get the token in that. So we have to avoid that. So let's create a list of APIs which we have to avoid, right? So let's create a bypass URLs, and in that will be an array, and inside this you have to list all the APIs which will be bypassed by this middleware. So first will be user.login, and this API can be called in both the ways. So we are going to use login slash and login, and this bypass URL you have to check over here, right? So before this only I can check if bypass dot includes request dot original URL. So in the request you will have this original URL, and in this you can just compare that original URL. If it is one of these bypass URL, just have to pass it. So we have to put else over here. So if it is inside this bypass, you have to just call next. You have to let it go. We don't have to check anything. And here module is wrong, so I'll correct that. Now I have to add this middleware in our APIs. So for that, first we have to open our server.js, and first we have to import this middleware. So let's require this. So const middleware is equals to require, and this will be middleware. So before calling any vwin route APIs, we just have to call this middleware function. So now let's test out this middleware. So in that postman, I am going to open a new get, and I'm going to call this category list API. Make sure your latest version of app is running, and then only call this. So now you can see that we have this unauthorized in this. We have to authorize this API call. What we are going to do, we are going to take this token, and then we are going to pass this in our header, right? So let's do that. And in this header, we have this key and value. So if you remember, this key should be authorization, which we are checking in our middleware, and value you can simply put this token. So when you add this token, you can see that we are getting the data in the API, and this is how you are going to add this token in all the APIs to make the whole application secure. I hope you understood this whole flow of encrypting the password and using this JWT token to make your whole application secure. So we are going to implement this JWT in our front end in the Angular series in upcoming videos. So do subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of these amazing videos which we are making in this e-commerce application. Thanks for watching the whole video. Happy coding everyone. See you in the next video.